Sometimes Jones and I have good ideas.
Yeah, rarely.
Sometimes we act on these ideas immediately, and sometimes these ideas sit in like some corner of the mind and then years later come back forward and are like, wait a second, we had that good idea and we never did it.
Yeah.
That's why we have harassed Ryan McCollum into being here with us today. So a little background on Ryan. So Ryan's wife, Emily, works currently in the ticket office.
That's right. Actually, she just moved over to the Rams Club, but she's doing tickets and parking for the Rams Club, yeah.
And is one of those rare people who gets things done.
Oh, yeah. And is pleasant.
Yes.
Pleasant and gets things
done.
Yes.
Like high on the list of if you need something done, call Emily and she will do it, which is a rare quality. But once we came to know more about Ryan, we understood why this works. So Ryan McCollum's here with us today. Ryan, tell folks just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk more about it.
Sure, yeah. So Emily and I, high school sweethearts, met in 2009, been together ever since. I went away to West Point in 2010, 4 years there, graduated, and spent 5 years active duty in the Army. My first permanent duty station was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So that's, we're from Youngstown, Ohio. That's what brought us down to Carolina to begin with. And while I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and Fort Bragg back then, Fort Liberty now, Emily was getting her master's in the sport admin program here at UNC. So that's sort of our, where we formed that Chapel Hill connection. And I spent another couple years in the Army after we got back from Iraq. I went up to D.C., spent a couple years in the Old Guard up there, and when we went to D.C., we thought, hey, that'll be a great place to get out of the Army from. We'll settle down. But it was really busy and really expensive. And it was a lot even before, COVID was ever a thing. So at that point, it was either back to Youngstown, Ohio or back to Carolina. And here we are. Yeah. So that's sort of in a nutshell how I know, the program and, sort of my connections there. Yeah.
West Point just seems like an incredible place. Now, I'm guessing that your 4 years were a little tougher than me showing up and being like, wow, this place is awesome. Like, what is that life like?
Yeah. So, funny enough, I went back for the first time since graduation a couple weeks ago for my 10-year reunion. And it was sort of a surreal full circle moment going with Emily and with Rose, our 1-year-old daughter. The experience, I tell people, as hard as it was, I would do it again. It was tough. The first year's really tough. And really, they put you through this crucible experience so that by the time you get out to the regular Army and you're expected to lead soldiers, that you'll be ready to do that. Mm-hmm. And, they've been doing it right for over, 220 years. So they've sort of got the model down. And it was difficult for sure, but worth every single second. Yeah.
I would think it takes a special type of person to be willing to do that.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I have a little trouble patting myself on the back and all that, right? But yeah, the people I met there were special people. The friends I made there are still my friends to this day, because you're really, you have to be kind of the whole package to get through it, right? You need to focus on your academics. You need to focus on your physical fitness. You need to focus on your military training and discipline in that regard. So it's really, they call it the 3 pillars, right? Those are the 3. And you need to be, beyond proficient in all 3 of those in order to succeed there. And, I did, Emily was going to college while I was going to college. And on my weekend passes, I'd go see what the real college experience was like. And I was very envious most weekends. And I would dread the drive back into the gates of West Point, which is just a uniquely great place, like especially in the winter. Like it's, it looks like Hogwarts. It's all granite. It's cold. You're right on the river. It's windy. You're like, God, what am I doing? Like, maybe I should just go to normal college. But I'm glad I stuck it out because it was worth every second.
Do you have family history in the military?
No, I don't. Well, not at West Point. So my uncle was in the Army. My great uncle was in Vietnam in the Army, and then my great grandfather on my mother's side was he was actually in World War II in the Navy. So we do have some military history there. And geez, now I'm thinking I do have a couple other of my parents' uncles who served. I certainly wasn't the only one in my extended family to serve, but it wasn't like there's this sort of this lineage of, that's sort of what our family did, right?
What happened to make like 16 or 17-year-old Ryan think this is a commitment I'm ready to make and I already know it?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I was probably like 10, 11 years old. And I was like I was obsessed with like the military channel. If anybody remembers that, I would watch like all those documentaries about like, old World War II battles and, Navy SEAL training. And I remember being in like 6th grade. I'm like, all right, yeah, I want to be in the military. Right. And then get to high school, started playing football, did, pretty well at that. I was getting recruited at mostly like small D1 or, sort of 1AA back when that used to be a thing. FCS schools, I think they are now. But, West Point started recruiting me and ended up offering me. And that sort of was like, okay, like this is something I kind of dreamed about when I was a kid. And now I have the opportunity to pursue that and my dream of playing college football. I mean, sign me up. So that's sort of how that happened.
So Jones and I talked on the pod for a long time about how the Army-Navy game was our like bucket list sports event. And we finally got to go one year, several years
Oh, nice.
ago,
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
in maybe like 19, 18, somewhere in that range. So we got to go to one.
We might have been in the same one. Yeah.
I think it was 18 because it was Jay Bateman, remember, was
that's
his
right.
like last year at Army before he came to Carolina, which would have been 2019.
That's right.
So it was 2018.
Okay.
So we've seen it from the outside and know how special that entire thing is.
Yeah.
You've seen it much closer than we have. What is it like from that vantage?
Oh, it's, Beat Navy is everything, right? I mean, that's, there's Beat Navy Tunnel at West Point. It's not just the football team. I mean, that's the whole, half the mantra of West Point is, Beat Navy. We are, sworn enemies one day a year, and the rest of the time we're comrades in arms. But it's a whole culture there, really, from, every single team, not just the football team. Even folks who aren't in, intercollegiate or competitive athletics. I mean, it's really a way of life, and it's eat, sleep, and breathe. Beat Navy. It's everything. And the way things are going now with us being in the same conference, Navy and Army both being in the AAC,
Right.
People are talking about, well, what if they play in the championship or will they do away with the Army-Navy game? I mean, I'm glad you guys got to go, cross that off your bucket list. It's a really special event. It's a really, I can't think of a lot more things more American than the Army-Navy game.
What was your record?
Oh, my record? I beat Navy once, but with the caveat, it was on the rugby team. So a little more about my experience at West Point. So recruited football player, was on the team for 2 years, and then spring ball going into my sophomore year, sorry. I tore my MCL in spring ball. It was about, I think it was like 4 or 5 months of rehab. So that my sophomore season, I was just on the rehab squad. I forget if it's a gray shirt or if they still call it that, but I was, medically ineligible. And then, came back, sort of lost my first step, right? Which, whether you're a linebacker or really any position on the field, that first step, the game was a little too fast for me to be competitive at that level. And I ended up going to play for the West Point rugby team. And then we ended up beating Navy that next year. So that was cool.
Rugby players seem crazy to me.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's an accurate assessment. Yeah.
What did you like about it? Just physical contact?
Oh my God, yeah, I loved rugby. In fact, when we moved back to Raleigh in 2019, I wanted to play again because Raleigh's got a pretty good, pretty respectable rugby program. And Emily was like, no, hell no. Like, you don't need to get another concussion. You don't need to, get another shoulder surgery. But I loved it. It was very competitive. And it's almost like just with the sheer, risk you take stepping out on the field with like no pads,
Sure.
full contact. It's like the sort of brotherhood you form. It's like anybody who's willing to step out on this field with me, like I know that they're, a ride or die type of person. And, the funny thing about rugby, at least what I was enamored with about it, was the respect that each side has for each other. So after every game, there's a social. The club brings in the opposing team, feed them drinks, hang out. And it goes back to that respect. It's like, hey, anybody who steps on that field against me, I also have respect for. It was a really awesome sport. And, my playing days are certainly behind me, but, maybe one day I'll get involved again somehow.
A men's rugby league.
Yeah. No, it was Raleigh. Yeah, you should look it up. Raleigh's got a great rugby program. If they were to, I don't know, if the opportunity would arise, I might have to have a discussion about it.
Emily.
They're crying out for Jones and I, obviously.
Yeah.
Having to beat away the recruiters. Look, I've told you so many times. Yeah. I don't know if you need any short, slow people who are not very tough, but if so, I'm available.
Yeah, ready to go.
Well, that's a common misconception. I mean, there are a lot of, it's almost like football. You got the forwards are like the linemen, the big guys, and then the backs are, typically smaller, quicker guys. Oh. I mean,
small and slow.
Yeah. What role would I play with these qualifications?
Yeah, there's somewhere for you.
It's over there on the sideline, just on the other side of the field. So when you leave West Point, did you go straight to Bragg?
No, I didn't. So once you graduate, so at West Point, your senior year, you pick your branch. This is actually a fun sort of thing that not a lot of people know about. So everything in West Point is class ranked. So at the time, there were 16 branches in the Army. You had infantry, armor, which is tanks, you had signals, which is like radio stuff and all that. So you pick your branch based off case rank, and the way they do it is you all go into an auditorium. You put in your preferences before, and then they just hand you an envelope, and you all open it together, and you're like, oh, I got infantry. That's what I wanted. Yeah, and there were some people over there like crying, like this is my last choice. Oh my God. It is sort of a wild experience. So once you get your branch, which is in the first semester of your senior year, the second semester of your senior year, you have what's called post night. And so all the infantry guys put in their post preferences. But the way you do that is you go to an auditorium and there's just a huge wall with a bunch of patches. There might be 30 82nd Airborne patches at Fort Bragg. And the number one guy gets to go up and pick his first choice. And then you keep going down the line. So luckily there were still some spots at Fort Bragg once they got all the way down to me. And
I was number 3, no big deal.
Yeah, no, I was not. But so that's how I found out I was going to Fort Bragg. But after West Point, you need to do your branch-specific training. So I had to go to Fort Benning, Georgia for about a year. I did the infantry officer course, airborne school, and ranger school. And then they sent me up to Fort Bragg. Yep.
Ryan's really good at casually mentioning things that are awesome that he's not bragging about. He's just letting you know it occurred.
Well, there are just people that they would not be willing to make this commitment, right? This is physically taxing, mentally taxing. It is a lengthy commitment.
Right.
Why were you willing to make this commitment? Why was it important enough to you to do this?
Yeah, well, once I was in it, right, once I was at West Point and I decided this is what I'm doing, I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all the way, right? I'm not just going to, kind of get half the experience or, try to, and no shame at all. And every branch is important. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying in my mind, I wanted to see how far I could take this thing in the time that I was in it. Because I also knew, while I was at West Point that I didn't want to be a 20-year guy, right? I didn't want to move every 3 years. I didn't want to put Emily or my family through that. It's a lot of stress that military families go through. And I knew I wanted to settle down and have roots. So I'm like, all right, I got 5 years of this. I'm just going to cut the brake lines and see how far I can go in 5 years. And I think I got really lucky along the way, and I was able to do that in a lot of regards, yeah.
Is it more physically taxing or mentally taxing?
It depends. It depends. I would say mentally, depending on, what school you're at, right? So, Ranger school was, 100 for mental and physical. right? I mean, it's a war of attrition. Some other types of schools you do in the Army are more academically focused. I think on a whole, God, because I think about what I used to be able to do physically, the physical requirements were never particularly a challenge because I was always relatively in good shape from, being a football player and stuff like that. But I would say both. Yeah, it's hard to pick one. It was mentally and physically taxing, but also rewarding in both respects.
What's a major washout of people at Ranger School?
Well, RAP week. So Ranger Assessment Program that's the first week of Ranger School. So that's the main washout period. Yeah, I think you lose, God, I haven't looked at the stats in a while, but it's over 50% of the class you lose in the first 7 days.
Wow.
Just because, you have the Ranger PT test. You have, the 12-mile ruck march. You have, all kinds of other different physical, obstacle courses and things like that, some folks, just aren't really prepped for. And even if you are adequately prepped, working on little sleep and, being in that stressful environment, some folks don't make it through that. I mean, I made it through a couple of those events, skin in my teeth. I was, it's a little bit of a funny story, but I was a winter ranger. So I reported for the first class in, 2015. So I had Christmas leave beforehand, and I said, I went home. I was like, all right, Mom, get me as fat as I can get while still running 5 miles in under 40 minutes. And I think I showed up to Ranger School at 2:45. I was one of the biggest, and it was mostly fat too. And I remember, I came down, I made the final turn, and, they have the clock running just like that one over there. I'm like, okay, I couldn't quite make it out. I saw it still started with a 3, though. You had to finish in under 40 minutes. And then as I got closer, it was 39:40. I was like, oh my God. So I had to sprint across the finish line. I think it had to be 39:57.
Hey.
But
it all counts.
I did exactly what I set out to do. I passed the PT test as fat as I possibly could, and it kept me a little bit warmer in the winter, but not much.
So, you said you were in Iraq, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
All right. So at some point you're over there, and it's real, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So is it at that point? Are you completely just falling into your training? Is that what it's all about at that, or does your mind go other places? How do you even mentally prepare yourself to be in a scenario like that?
Yeah, it's first of all, that was probably of course the thing I'm most proud of, with my time in the service. And again, sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier is, that was something that I had wanted to do. If I'm going to be in the Army, I'm going to try to go to a unit that I know is due to deploy, in my time there. And yeah, it was it was real, right? You're not, training anymore,
sure,
right? But it was, we do train so much, and especially, all Army units are great, but with a unit like the 82nd Airborne Division, we had a really high op tempo. So the year before we went to Iraq, our brigade was on the Global Response Force, is what it was called back then, GRF, and pretty much that's America's break in case of emergency. You can jump anywhere in the world within 18 hours. We weren't allowed to leave more than 60-mile radius from base. And again, you weren't on this, it was rotational, right? So, hey, your battalion is on the, 1 hour recall this weekend. And then, you might go to a 2-day or a 3-day recall later down the line. But, anyhow, that sort of prepped me, that high op tempo, that high level of readiness sort of prepped, our unit really, really well for Iraq. And yeah, it was kind of, I think it almost in a lot of ways would have been easier in a day and age where you don't have, cell phones or the USO.
Right.
Because I'm thinking back to when I was in Ranger School. you're just in it. You had no phone. I was writing letters to Emily like I was in the Civil War. Like, and you're able
Dearest Emily.
Yeah. I hope this letter finds you warm. Like, so it would almost in a lot of ways be easier because, you work all night or all day, whatever schedule you're on, it's intense and the stakes are high. And then, you sort of like have to do a full like mental paradigm shift. Be like, all right, like, I'm gonna give Emily a call and tell her everything's all right and all that. It was you kind of had to wear a couple different hats in that regard. It was difficult to balance that for sure, but luckily everything went about as well as it could, and I'm really proud of that mission we were on. We were supporting the Iraqi National Army. In the Battle of Mosul, which ISIS, if you recall, they had taken over much of Iraq, and we kind of had to go back over there. The 101st Airborne Division came in before us and sort of pushed them from Baghdad up to Mosul. Their last sort of stronghold in Iraq was in Mosul, which I think even today is the biggest city in northern Iraq. And we sort of supported them in their push to get those guys out and, disbanded and into Syria or wherever they are now.
Do those days ever start to feel normal?
Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous things about being in that setting is, complacency kills, right? And so they did start to feel normal, where it's a lot like Groundhog Day. You're like, all right, I'm waking up, I'm going to check these guard towers, I'm going to go out on this patrol, and it is a lot of the same stuff, but it's hard to stay vigilant and locked in because they do start to kind of blend together and feel like normal days. But you got to keep telling yourself and keep telling your men there's no such thing as a quote normal day over there. It only takes once, so keep on high alert. Yeah.
What's the hardest part about leading guys in that situation who maybe don't have the same level of training that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the training that we did together before, we came over to Iraq. So, you build a lot of rapport and you build a lot of trust with those soldiers in your pre-deployment training. So, I mean, before we had ever even gone to Iraq together, we had rotation down at the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana, which is pretty much like a mock deployment. You go through those training events and you build that trust prior to. And then there's also a sort of element, and almost like going back to the rugby thing. It's like, all right, well, this guy's here, right? This girl's here. I trust like on some base level that they are, competent and able to do their job. Yeah. And you need to trust your folks in order to be effective. Yeah.
Not that this would be a scenario unique to you or to anyone because we know it happens frequently.
Yeah.
But trying to assimilate yourself back into quote unquote real life. What was that like?
That was wild. Yeah, I remember coming back and Emily was finishing up her final year of her master's program here at UNC. So we lived down in Sanford like before I deployed because it's about 45 minutes to Bragg, 45 minutes up here. Good way to split the distance. But obviously, like when I left, it makes no sense for her to live in Sanford. She got an apartment up here in Chapel Hill. So I, come back and I'm like living in an apartment in Chapel Hill. Like I remember being shocked at the amount of green around me. Cause I mean, for those who haven't had the pleasure, I mean, Iraq is it's like Mad Max. Like I didn't see green the whole time I was over there. There's like oil fields on fire. Like it's very like dystopian place, and just sort of coming back and seeing all the green and like also on like not like a psychological level, but just seeing that like nothing really changed, for anyone else. Just kind of going about their day, and it's like, wow, like all right, like all this stuff's going on over there, and like it's just peace and quiet over here, which is great. I mean, that's why that's what that's why we serve, right? That's what we want. But it was sort of a profound sort of realization, and it was a little difficult to make that transition back into, and it wasn't a full transition into like civilian life, right? Sure. I mean, I was still in the Army, but it took a couple months for sure. Yeah.
Did you get I don't know if angry is the right term. I think that would bother me a little bit if you had just been doing what you were doing, and you come back and you're like the biggest decision that Jones has to make is whether he's getting a salad or a burrito for lunch. Like, I mean, did it tick you off a little bit? I mean, I don't even know what the emotion would be.
Not at all. I mean, no, I wasn't ticked off about it at all. I mean, if anything, like I said, I was sort of like, that's why we do it. Like, that's what we want. And also, and I don't know if this is just my old, Rust Belt Steel Town roots coming back, but it's like, look, I mean, no one told me to go in the Army. Like, nobody said, hey, you got to go do this. I didn't get drafted, right? I volunteered for this. I wanted to do this, and then I did it. So why would I have any sort of resentment towards anyone else that they didn't do that? I mean, that's just unfair. And yeah, no, I didn't feel anything like that at all. Yeah.
Tell us about the Old Guard, because I feel like that's one of the most awesome things you can do in the military.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, the Old Guard was a very, very unique and awesome experience for me. It was a great way to finish out my time in the Army, because like I said, I kind of went into it knowing that I had a 5-year shelf life. I'm like, all right, I got to do everything I got to do everything I can in 5 years. So it's an application-only unit. You're stationed up in D.C., and you are essentially the face of the Army, and that, all the ceremonies, all the funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, that's all the Old Guard, right? So it was an awesome experience. And the way it's split up, you have a battalion that does all the funerals, and you have a battalion that does all the ceremonies. And there's overlap there, right? That's not a hard and fast rule, but generally speaking, that's what it was. And I was in the ceremonies battalion, and it was really awesome to go out and sort of represent the Army in that capacity as well, especially after having, gone and represented the Army, in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne. It was really cool. And the op tempo was much better in the Old Guard than it was in the 82nd. I mean, pretty much if you didn't have a ceremony, you come in, you do PT, you kind of drill a couple things with your platoon, and then if you didn't have a ceremony later, go work out and hit happy hour. I mean, who knows? Yeah, but it was an awesome, and it was a very humbling experience too. Being able to represent the Army to heads of state, right? I remember when Emmanuel Macron came to visit the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. We put on the wreath-laying ceremony for him. And, I was standing from me to you, the French prime minister. It's I got to experience a lot of really cool things like that I'll certainly never forget.
Just going to Arlington as a normal tourist and riding the shuttle bus and doing all the things that a tourist does is incredibly impactful. I'm guessing you've walked through there when there's no one else there.
Yes, yeah.
What's that like? And what kind of different perspective does that give you on what you had done?
Right. It was, it's just indescribably, humbling experience to be able to do that, to walk around the cemetery sort of when no one else is there. The Old Guard also does a really cool thing every Memorial Day. We're the ones who put all the little flags in front of every single headstone in Arlington National Cemetery. It's unbelievably humbling. Only enlisted soldiers can serve as tomb guards, right? So that's sort of run all by the non-commissioned officers and the soldiers who qualify to be a tomb guard. But at times, every day there's a duty officer, right, for the Old Guard, right, who has to go around and check everything on post and sort of make sure everyone's where they're at and that no fires are happening anywhere. And it's called staff duty. And, staff duty sucks. Nobody wants to be the staff duty officer. You're getting calls from people at 2 a.m. who are locked out of their room and stuff like that. But one really unique thing I got to do as a staff duty officer at the Old Guard was, hey, go check on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Make sure the guards are, out and they have what they need. And, just being in the cemetery at 1 a.m, it's it's indescribable. Very humbling experience. And especially I had just, in 2017 when I was in Iraq, we had lost one of our platoon leaders who was a good friend of mine. And he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery probably a couple weeks before I started at the Old Guard. So that was, I went and saw him frequently. And, that was a really, obviously powerful experience. But it certainly gave me a greater appreciation for what the Old Guard was doing in our mission at that time.
What's your lapel pin?
Yeah, that's the 82nd Airborne Division. Yep. Down at, Fort Liberty, what was once Fort Bragg. Yep. Those are my guys.
What are you doing now?
So I am an attorney in Raleigh, North Carolina now. Yep.
What made you want to do that?
Well, that's a good question. I knew I wanted to have a career that would still push me, but without, requiring me to move or, put my family through a whole bunch of turmoil and stuff. And I had always sort of thought about being a lawyer, when I was, younger. And it's something I never really thought I would get around to doing. But once, I started really planning my transition out of the Army, I was looking around at what was out there, and I wasn't really passionate about anything else. And I had, sort of this, almost childhood dream at the point, and hey, yeah, you want to be a lawyer at some point. Maybe you ought to look into that. And I did. And I just bought an LSAT prep book and took the LSAT a couple times. And then applied to law schools and got in. And here I am.
Have you ever thought about politics?
God, no. No, I haven't. I just, I haven't really. I have thought about politics, and I've decided I don't think I ever want to do something like that. I mean,
why not? Because you'd be
good at it.
People would actually want to vote for you.
The climate,
Which would
guys.
Be
I know this is fortuitously we're recording this on Election Day, but I mean, the climate out there, guys. I mean, it's
you could change that.
That's a tall order for anyone, but I think
there are a lot of other things you've done.
Fair enough, but I mean, my thing is, if I really want to have this nice, quiet life with my family, politics probably not the right place for me.
I'm trying to think of the right way to ask it. I'm not trying to get in any way political with this question.
Oh, not at all.
But
let's have it.
I think we can all agree that it is a challenging time, just as far as a divided time in our country.
Absolutely. It's very divisive, yes.
As someone who's put everything he's got to protect it and defend it, is that disheartening to you to see that when you have literally put your life on the line to try and support and defend it? Yeah,
I think it is. Well, I mean, this is like a multi-layered question, right? So, and we're on the record right now. So, it is disheartening, but I think it's not uniquely disheartening for me because I served. I think it's disheartening, for all Americans to, be, in such a divisive time politically, right? I mean, even, God, what was it? 16 years ago. I remember, I didn't vote in that election because I think I was 17, but just thinking back to the McCain-Obama election, we were civil and, we had our differences, but, it kind of stopped there. And, I think in a lot of ways, both sides now are well, if you're not with me, you're against me. And if, you vote for them, then, you're this. And if you vote for him, then you're that. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, political discourse is, what this nation was founded upon, and there should always, be, with an opinion, an ear, ready to listen to the other side. And it is kind of disheartening to, be in a time where, in many cases, that's not the climate we're in right now.
So, what could we take from your unit or the Army Rangers or the 82nd Airborne? Because you don't like everybody in those groups.
No,
and
absolutely not.
You never want to see again. But you're also willing to trust them and go out and do things with them that you might not do even with your best friend.
Right.
So what could we take from that to make all the rest of us a little more effective?
Well, I think it goes back to trust, right? Like I said earlier, I trusted those folks because I knew, what the training they'd gone through, and I knew, sort of what they had sacrificed to be, in that unit, in the Army, with me. And I think if, we could possibly, recognize that we all have a lot more in common than we do apart, I think we might trust each other a little bit more. I don't think either side's trying to ruin the world or the country, right? But, don't turn it on the news because they'll tell you differently. think we need to get back to a place where we can just have a conversation and, not judge people based on their political opinions, because at the end of the day, that's what they are. They're political opinions. If they were political facts, we wouldn't be having debates.
When you meet somebody in daily life who tells you they served, what do you know about them instantly?
Yeah, I know at some base level, we made the same decision, to raise our hands and, swear an oath to the Constitution. And sort of as you touched on earlier, Jones, that, it does take a different, or, at least I wouldn't say special. I don't think I'm special, but, it takes a special type of commitment to do that. So there's some base level of respect there for sure. And of course, shared camaraderie. We have a lot of the same experiences, even, across the branches. Experiences may vary, but more or less, we've all been through sort of the same thing. And I've realized that I'm a member at the Cary VFW now, which is, Veterans of Foreign Wars. And, just sharing stories and kind of reminiscing. It's funny, everyone puts on the rose-colored glasses, once they get out. When 90% of the folks, and maybe sometimes even me, we're talking about how we can't wait to get out. But you look back now and you're like, wow, those are some of the best times I had. Some of the most meaningful, bonds I made while I was in the Army. And certainly don't take those for granted. And it's like, I wish I took more pictures. All the cliche stuff. But when I meet someone else who served, there is that instant level of camaraderie. I would think, yeah.